The politics of language and identity in Latin America. This is the broad subject that we have been exploring in our class, Anthropology 1795. Taking ideas and concepts from the variety of topics we have covered, here is how I decided to narrow my focus for the final paper. I have chosen to research Bolivia because I will be spending a month there this summer on my first trip to South America, and I'm always very motivated to learn more about a country before I travel to it. Something interesting and relevant about Bolivia is that it has a very high indigenous population relative to urban population when compared to other countries in South America. These people still speak their native languages. The most common are Quechua and Aymara. However, many of them are also competent in Spanish. Think about the reading about drunken speech and how the people in the Andes would often switch between the two languages, bringing up issues of life and traditions before the era of the conquistadors, as well as of modernity and advancement in society. From there, I chose to narrow my focus even further to do research on traditional medicine practices in Bolivia. The reading about the midwives in the Yucatan Peninsula piqued my interest in particular, and it made me curious to know more about what kinds of similar interactions between humanitarian workers and traditional peoples might be occurring in other parts of South America. So the questions I asked myself were, what are some examples of Bolivian traditional medicine practices? And what are some examples of indigenous Bolivians interacting with people outside their culture, such as urban Bolivians or even people who practice Western medicine? The first source is an ethnographic study by the anthropologist Lynn Sicking. This source first discusses the type of traditional medicine practices and ideologies within rural Bolivian populations, before then elaborating on interactions between rural and urban populations in city markets. She outlines the different kinds of vendors that hail from indigenous backgrounds and their role in the social space that is the Cochabamba market, which is frequented by a very diverse group of people. Basically, it explores the changing world of traditional medicine as indigenous people become more and more obliged to interact with urban Bolivians. The other source is a study by Joseph Bastian, Community Health Workers in Bolivia, Adapting to Traditional Roles in the Andean Community. Community health workers are people from indigenous communities elected to be trained by doctors who practice modern medicine in primary care, in order to serve as liaisons between their local communities, facilitating cross-cultural communication. Although doctors in Bolivia are required to spend a year practicing in rural communities after they graduate, most of them don't bother learning indigenous languages since they consider the indigenous people to be inferior peasants. It is the hope that the community health workers will serve as a solution to this problem. Here is how I intend to structure my research paper. First, I will do a brief introduction of Bolivia, its location, geography, and populations. Then I will talk about the different traditional medicine practices that are still present in indigenous communities around Bolivia. The bulk of the paper will be about examples of increasing interaction between rural/indigenous and urban communities, drawing from my two primary sources. This, of course, leaves questions to ask. The main questions I have for now are, how might these phenomena relate to identity? Is there a shift of identity, or do some of these people end up having to compromise their identities in order to function in this more modern society? What kind of role do languages and language play in these interactions? Do you have questions or suggestions? I'd love to hear them, and I'm looking forward to discussing them in class to help make my research paper the best it can be.